Today I'm going to review with you how to create and edit quiz and test questions in Schoology. So right now I'm sitting in one of my classes, but you could also make a quiz or a test from your resources as well. So I'm going to start this by going to Add Materials, and then I'm going to choose Add Test/Quiz. And this is going to bring me to the first piece of information that Schoology is going to ask me, and this is just the basic information for the quiz. So I'm going to make a history quiz. You're going to assign a due date with it. So I'm just going to make it due for tonight at 11:59 p.m. And then I'm going to change, I don't want it to be worth 100 points. I'm going to make it a 20-point quiz and then tell it what grading category to go in. Maybe it's just a formative quiz. You can leave this as numeric. And then you do get some options at the bottom. You can individually assign this quiz to certain students if you want to, or you can create grading groups in your members tab in Schoology on each class. And then let's say you made a red, blue, and a green group, you could assign this particular quiz to only a certain subset of students. Your other options here are to publish or unpublish to students. So it's just whether or not you want it to be viewable by them right away. Grade statistics enabled or disabled. That's just if you wanted your kids to be able to see like the class average, the highest score, the lowest score. They would be able to see that if you have this enabled. That's not showing student names or anything with grades. It's just showing the overall class statistics. And then whether or not you want comments to be enabled once you put the quiz out, that is good for like questions, things like that, that the students could post, especially if they're going to be doing it not during class time. And then once you do have the quiz all set up, you can copy this quiz and you could copy it to your resources or to other classes. So once you have this all set up the way you want it, you're going to hit create. And then it's going to load the next page of the quiz setup, which is where you would get into creating your different quiz questions and the settings for the quiz in general. So a couple things with setting up questions. When you go to a question, so let's say I just wanted to put in a multiple choice question. The text box at the top is where you would type in your question, and you could put a lot more than just a question in here. You could put pictures, you can put videos, different graphics, links to outside websites. You can put that all in here, and that would appear to the student before they get the options for their to answer the question. Just like always, you can always put in an audio or video recording if you wanted to read the question to them or put a video of yourself explaining something. You could definitely do that too. You would put your choices for them down in the boxes right here, and then check the correct answer for, if you want Schoology to grade it, you have to check which answer is correct. So they would, so it knows what question goes with what answer. Some options below here too. You can randomize choices. So if you want everybody's A, B, and C, D to be different, you can click randomize choices. Allow partial credit. That's important if you have a question with multiple correct answers. And let's say that you checked multiple correct answers up here. If you want them to get a point for answering choice 1 correctly, but let's say they didn't get choice 3, they didn't mark that one. If you have allow partial credit, and let's say that you said this was 2 points because there's 2 correct answers, then even if they got choice 1 but then marked choice 3, they would still get 1 point for that question. So you just have to think about how you want that to work. And then timed question, whether or not you want them to be limited to a certain amount of time for that particular question. So, and then at the bottom, you can align learning objectives with each question. And that works really good because once they answer it in the quiz or test and Schoology grades it for you, then it filters into the mastery gradebook and you'll get a little bit more data on how kids are doing connected to those particular learning objectives. So I'm going to cancel this one because I'm not going to create this question right now. But then one other question that I will show you is the matching question type. And it's a little bit different. So you still put your question, graphics, anything that you want up in the text editor, But for this one, you're going to put in, let's say that you had a list of 4 vocabulary terms. You would put those on the left, and then you would put the definitions that go with them on the right. And with this type of question, you really need to think about, do you want to allow partial credit for, let's say they got 2 out of the 4 right? Do you want them to get 2 points for that question because they got 2 out of the 4 right? If that's the case, then you have to allow partial credit, and then you have to make the question worth as many points as the number of items that you have. So if I left it like this and I had 4 vocab terms right here, I would have to change this to worth 4 points and have this checked as allow partial credit. Otherwise, if they get their first one wrong right here, then it's going to mark the whole question wrong. So they would get a 0 out of 4 on that question, even if they got these other 3 terms correct. So that's just something you want to think about when you're setting up a question like this. Subjective question, that just means that you would have to grade these independently. Like Schoology will not grade it for you if you have it listed as a subjective question. So if for whatever reason there was some wiggle room with what they put for their answers right here, you can mark it as subjective question, and then Schoology is just going to leave it ungraded until you come in after the fact and grade that particular question. And again, you can make it a timed question, and you can tie learning objectives in with these as well. So you can add as many questions as you need. And then in the settings, you will want to take a look at this too before you put this out to students. You've got instructions. These are the overall instructions for the quiz. So if there's particular resources they can use, different websites, links, things like that, you can put those in here. You want to make sure that submissions are enabled so that students can actually take the quiz. So you can have it always on. If you just want to enable it yourself, you can hit enable, or you can enable it either until a certain time or in a window too. So if I have enable from until, then it's going to ask me for when do you want this available from and when is it available till. So that's just will open up a window for students to take the quiz. But otherwise, if you don't have this as enable, they won't be able to take that quiz. Whether or not you want a time limit on it, you can check that as yes or no. Attempt limit, if this is something that you want them to be able to retry in order to take it multiple times to try to master it, you could give them multiple times to take that particular quiz. If it's just something you want them to take once and take a look at how they did, then you would just leave that as one time. Randomize the order of the questions. You just choose yes or no, then everybody's number 1 would be different than everybody else. So that's just something you'll have to think about when you're setting up the quiz or the test, whether that's something you want to do. Whether or not you're using page breaks. Sometimes if you're having like an essay test or something, you might want to switch it to 1 question per page so that they have that just 1 question to think about on each page. And then when they answer it, they would go to the next page. Question review, I would leave this marked as yes. That just makes it so students can go back and change their answers to questions before they actually submit it at the end. So if they cruise through and they answer some questions and they want to go back and change them, they would be able to do that if you have this marked as yes. Resumable, I would say leave that as yes. That just makes it so if there's an interruption in the class, they get called down to the office or you have a fire drill or something, they would be able to come back in and just pick that test up right away and keep taking it. And then view submissions. This is just how you want them to be able to see things once the quiz is done. So if you don't want them to see anything, you'd leave that checked as no. If you want them to see how they did, but not see the individual questions as far as like what are the correct answers for all the questions, if you want them to just see which ones they got right, which ones they got wrong, then you would mark that as yes. And one thing to remember for this one is they will be able to see what they put for responses. So if they chose letter A on number 1 and got that one right, obviously they would know that letter A was the correct answer for number 1. If you want them to see For even the ones they got wrong, if you want them to see what the correct answer was for that question, then you would leave it as yes with correct answers. And then as soon as they're done with the test, they would be able to look back at the questions and say, okay, for number 2, I put D, but the answer was actually B. They would be able to see that data right away when they were done with the test. So that's just kind of, you'll have to decide what you want this to be. And one thing is, if you put it on yes, if you have it on randomized order, then everybody's number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, will be different than the next student. So the first student wouldn't be able to say, well, question 1 was A, and tell that to everybody else, because everybody's is going to be a little bit different. So if you wanted to minimize the effect of that, you could put this as yes, but then use the randomized order feature, and then the questions will be different for all of the students. So you'd add in your questions, you would go through your settings, and then once you have those all saved in there, you can then preview your test to see what it would look like for a student. And then once students start to submit quizzes or tests, you would be able to view them in results and see any questions or comments that students had put on that quiz or test as well. So this is how to add a quiz or a test in Schoology.